So, as you say, we're still seeing a lot of TV buying done on actually very blunt audience measurements in terms of age, demographic. And what this really doesn't do is look at audience behaviours and sort of the vast range of insights that actually are out there now to be targeting on. But on a more positive note, we are starting to see sort of brands embracing the different types of insights that we can apply to TV. And we can really start to see the impact that this is having in terms of effectiveness of TV. So I'm going to go through three areas, a couple of which are much sort of more traditional when we're talking about data, so around sort of audience segmentation and data performance. But the first thing I wanted to speak about is how we can use sort of our understanding of context and audience moods and the impact that this can have on sort of the outtake that people are taking from our advertising. Because when we think of context, audiences don't necessarily dislike adverts per se, but they do hate disruptive adverts. And we're increasingly hearing them say to us, don't talk at me, talk with me. And I think with people having increasingly different amounts of choice in the way that they can consume content, they also want us to be talking to them with relevant advertising. And this is where really our understanding of context and mood really comes in. Just taking it into some real world examples here. You'd think that someone who makes important decisions would be very consistent, unbiased, fair in the way they make their decisions. Piece of research that looked at the over 1,000 judges and the decisions that they made. We saw that there was a 65% chance that they would award you bail if you have a hearing just after they've had arrest. This goes all the way down to 0, rather worryingly for the person just before the judge's next break. So what this really demonstrates is sort of the effect of mental depletion. And when we see this, we can see that people tend to stick with the status quo. So if you ever find yourself in front of a judge, try and go for the morning slot. Looking at the stock market, economists have done a lot of work that look at a direct correlation between the hours of sunshine and the performance of the stock market, really reflecting the understanding that the weather and a sunny day really has an impact on people's moods. On the flip side of this, we can see a real decline in stock market performance when a nation's country goes out of the World Cup. So watch out in June. But what does this actually mean for advertising, and how can we apply our understanding of people's emotions and moods to the messaging that we serve them? Just a couple of examples here. When people are in a state of romantic desire, for example, if they're watching a romantic film, they're in a mood whereby they want to stand out from the crowd, and that's because they want to attract a mate in a positive way. So if you're targeting a message in this sort of environment, what you want to do is give people ways to stand out from the crowd. So that's when you talk about scarcity values, such as limited edition, limited time only. Whereas if you have a message that starts talking and appealing to social norms, for example, 9 out of 10 people buy this product, it's going to be less appealing to people in this context and mood because it doesn't appeal to this distinctiveness. On the flip side, if you think about how people react to fear, they tend to want to group together for safety. So if, for example, you've got an advert in a film, a horror film, if you make social claims that everyone is doing it, over 1 million sold, that's going to appeal much more to people than if you start talking about scarcity in this context. Gone backwards. So what we can see really is that our recall is better when the tone of the content actually matches our emotion. And some research into this area asked people to read a short story where one of the characters was happy and one of them was sad. And when they asked them afterwards which one they most associated with, it was the one whose mood most reflected theirs. And when they were asked which character they could remember the most about, again, it was the ones whose mood reflected theirs. And this has got really important learnings for us in terms of targeting people's emotions. And what we can see is it really gives us an opportunity in the current market to target on mood and context. And this is because of the emergence of much more AI-based tech that allows us to bring out to sort of track themes in visual content, but also the amount of emotional tracking tools that are now available and that we can link through to connected TV. So I'd say before you start really digging into the data, you really need to understand this area. Having said that, the next area is about how using audience data can be really powerful for you. And again, we're seeing there's still a lot of broad demographic data being used to target, and this really isn't making the most of the data that people have available to them in terms of audience. But before we talk about data, we've got to sort of talk about the right sort of data. And when we talk about self-reported data, there's some real limitations here. A survey was done in about 2005, which looked at self-reported data in terms of consumption of soft drinks. People were asked to fill in a diary for a week, and 42% of them who had reported that they drank a specific soft drink every day actually didn't drink it at all in that week. So the difference between people, what they actually say and what they actually do can be very different, which is why we tend not to try and rely on self-reported data. What we really need to be doing is using data on people's actual behaviours and looking at this right across the purchase journey so we can understand as much about the audience segmentation as possible. And similarly to self-reported data, we also need to be careful around the use of social data versus search data, which tends to give a much more accurate representation of people's intentions and desires, as opposed to social data where they're sort of projecting their image, self-image onto people, so it's not so reliable. So an example of how we've used digital behaviours in terms of audience segmentations was for a TV campaign that we ran for one of our clients recently. They knew that TV worked for them in terms of driving people to the website, but they were really struggling to hone down into within that audience who were the ones that offered the best chance of conversion to sale. So how we approached it was running a digital-first campaign using targeting segments that it was possible to replicate across addressable TV. And from this, we could see which audience segments were most valuable to them, to driving through to conversion. We then used these audience segments on addressable TV to reach the audiences that we knew were most valuable to the client. And what this really did was reduce wastage and improve the effectiveness of the TV activity. So we can really see the value of working with the TV stations that've got this really powerful first-party data. I'm not going to talk about GDPR too much because there's an expert in the room who's going to do it a lot better than me. But what we see is it's a real opportunity to work with the TV broadcasters and learn more about their audiences because there is such a relationship of trust with them there. If you think about the Channel 4 customer promise, where they're very open with their consumers about how they're using their data, we can see the impact that this has had in terms of the level and number of subscribers that people such as Channel 4 and ITV have. Because people can see the value exchange between the high value quality content that they want and giving this data that we as advertisers can then use to target more specific audiences. So the final area where we use data is really around the area of performance. And brands have always used purchase data to optimize their performances, and they really want to see the impact of somebody seeing their ad and what this does in terms of people actually leading to purchase. So we can use this data really to drive optimizations for future campaigns. Apologies, I nicked this off Sky because I like it. But it's really how they follow that path to purchase and do optimizations. So you can track who watched your ad and drove through to purchase. You can look at performance KPIs and attribute these back to TV. So in terms of numbers of searches, frequency, lengths of engagement. And you can also use it to really now drill down into much tighter audience segments to work out which ones are the most valuable to you, which means you can optimize your TV going forwards. But it's not just about using past learnings to optimize future campaigns. We're also using a lot of attribution tools now to really optimize in real time using this performance data. So really looking very, very quickly at the day parts, days of week, channels, weights that are really delivering immediate impact in terms of brand performance. And this takes us to a much more programmatic model of TV buying. And it can work very easily in the addressable market. I think if we want to start applying this much more to the linear market, what we need is a lot more cooperation from the TV stations in terms of offering flexibility so that we can really use the effectiveness of TV. And this was mentioned earlier today about sort of the measurement illusion. And this is one of the barriers to using data and performance data in particular that we have on TV at the moment. Because we do know there's actually a vast amount of TV that is not being measured now. As sort of viewing fragments, audiences use loads of different platforms and formats to view the content, we're actually missing out on some of this performance. And what that really does is mean that the true value of TV isn't being properly monetized. So as agencies, as advertisers, as TV stations, we really all need to be pushing together to get a much more unified, holistic measurement of video performance across the marketplace. It's not an easy thing to do. I think if it was, Project Dovetail would be finished, completed, but it's not. It's a very difficult task, but it's one that is vital to TV's performance. And I think the other vital part of driving TV forward and really giving it an opportunity to fight in the same sort of arena as the digital giants is around data collaboration. And this is about giving the TV station scale of reach and data. And what this really needs is, in the first instance in the UK, is a real unified approach to using data such as AdSmart. Conversations are already taking place about Sky sharing this information with ITV, Channel 4. Obviously, Sky spent 10 years and hundreds of millions of pounds developing AdSmart, so it's not a case of them just sharing this data. But it really is what the TV industry needs, and once that can get working, we can start looking at different ways of trading TV in different models. So to summarise, I think it's really key that we look at the different types of data that are available to us, both in terms of audience and performance. But I think we also can't ignore the fact that context and our audience's emotions are a vital part to proving TV's effectiveness. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this overview. In particular, I found interesting the introduction of emotional targeting, so getting away with groups altogether, but looking at different psychological states.
Yeah.
Now, we've heard many of case studies in the TV industry that try to do those things or kind of other things with mood and emotions, but how scalable is it really? How far can you standardize? Is this standardized? Are we on the route to standardization, or is it really experimental at this moment?
It's still quite early days. I'd say it's actually something that years and years ago, it was something that was a lot easier to do through linear TV when there was far fewer channels, and media buying was much easier than it is today in terms of scale, because you could actually shift spots around, think about emotions, shift your copy. I think today, with the vast fragmentation and scale of the TV market, it is a lot harder. But I think with, as I mentioned, sort of a lot of the emotional tracking tech, a lot of content recognition. When we start moving away from the linear TV world and much more towards addressable TV, connected TVs, suddenly that opens up a lot more opportunities.
And these targeting criteria, would you say they are already in the, let's say, programmatic TV interfaces encoded, or not yet?
I'd say they're getting there, but they're certainly not in widespread use at the moment.
Good. I'm open up to the audience. Any questions to Liz? Yes.
Maybe a stupid question. The 35% which is not measured within the TV audience measurements, are you talking about content which is not recognized?
In terms of, well, it's content that's not recognised necessarily either as TV content or is viewed on other platforms. That means we can't get a unified sort of impression of everything that's being viewed that is the TV content.
I think time for one more. Yes, please, over there.
Liz, it's Jeff from Sky.
Hi.
We clearly have to talk because we've just released through Carrier the ability you can change copy within a day.
Yeah.
If you need, so one of the things that we're looking at is automating that end to end, and we like to wave a flag in the UK. I think we're doing stuff pretty well. So we've even just trialled through a company called Adelyzer that actually tracks web traffic. As that web traffic responds to a particular ad, we've linked it to Carrier, and Carrier will change the copy for you the following day.
Yeah.
So we're getting close. We're getting close.
Yeah, I think it's massively powerful, and I think with working with people like Adelyzer, who are so obviously at the forefront of sort of pushing TV attribution, they're really powerful tools. I think the next challenge is going to be outside of looking at the individual TV sales houses. How can we ever sort of work together to do those shifts across different platforms? And I think obviously that opens up a much wider conversation about sort of TV trading, regulation, things like that. But I think that's ultimately where we need to get to. But I know that's no easy task.
Probably also.
Put it all on Sky, sorted.
Also, how to keep the value of the standard, the consensus in TV data, which has been completely lost in the online world. I think it's a key asset that, despite all the targeting, the industry should try to preserve.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I think you can go, particularly with TV, you can go too far down the route of sort of optimizing on performance and audience segmentations and going really niche, because then that's exactly that. You miss the real value of TV, which is that sheer reach and emotional connection with audiences at scale.
Liz, thank you.
Thank you.
Right.